joining a guest. We're waiting right now, President, to be speaking. You can see Melania there. They are at the Israel Museum. They just left Yad Vashem, which is the Holocaust Memorial, and they are there with the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, and his wife there in the blue, Sarah Netanyahu. And our President is going to be speaking momentarily at the Israel Museum.
That's right. A little bit behind schedule you got yesterday, but a lot closer to the schedule. And clearly, with each stop, the bond seems to grow thicker between the two countries and the two leaders.
Here they are.
Ladies and gentlemen, this museum tells the story of Israel. Mr. President, you've just gone through a fast-paced visit through our past, our present, and we work together to fashion the future. Here you can see Hebrew texts of the Bible that are 2,000 years old. You can see the seals and coins that bear witness to nearly 4,000 years of our presence in this land. You can see the menorahs we lit, the synagogues we prayed in during our long exile. But the story of Israel is not simply the story of the past. It's the story of a nation reborn, of a barren land brought back to life, of an ancient language revived, of an exiled people who returned, of Jewish sovereignty restored. We have a saying, Mr. President, the people of Israel lives, the state of Israel lives on, alive as ever, a thriving democracy, a powerful army, an innovative free economy, and a proud, resilient people. Mr. President, over the years, Israel has had many friends, but Israel has never had and will never have a better friend than the United States of America. That friendship is reflected in the overwhelming support of the American people, strong bipartisan support of the American Congress, and the supports of American presidents from Harry Truman to Donald Trump. Thank you, President Trump, for your steadfast friendship to the Jewish people and the Jewish state. It is deeply, deeply appreciated. Mr. President, I believe that the alliance between America and Israel is more important than ever. Together we must defeat those who glorify death and protect those who celebrate life. Together we can defeat the forces of militant Islam who seek to destroy the civilized world. And together we can and we must defeat the forces of terror. Terrorism, the deliberate slaughter of innocents, must be equally condemned and equally fought, whether it strikes in Europe, in America, or in Israel, or for that matter, anywhere else. And as you said this morning, Mr. President, funding and rewarding terrorism must end. Standing next to you, President Abbas condemned the horrific attack in Manchester. Well, I hope this heralds a real change, because if the attacker had been Palestinian and the victims had been Israeli children, the suicide bomber's family would have received a stipend from the Palestinian Authority. That's Palestinian law. That law must be changed. I hope that President Abbas heeds the principles, the clear, strong, moral, and practical principles that you enunciated today, President Trump. Stop rewarding terrorists, stop glorifying murderers. I believe that this is the first and the crucial step towards the road to a genuine peace that Israel seeks and that I believe that together with you we can achieve. President Trump, working with you, I believe we can advance a durable peace between Israel and its Arab neighbors, as well as the Palestinians, because of the common danger that the Arab world and Israel face from Iran, and because of the leadership that you bring to this process. Ultimately, around the world, I have no doubt that freedom will defeat fear, that light will vanquish darkness, because that is the story of America, a nation that has defeated the forces of tyranny, that is the beacon and hope of all humanity. And that is the story of Israel, a nation that has overcome unimaginable horrors and impossible odds, and is the hope of the Jewish people. Mr. President, thank you for your historic visit, for your unbelievably moving gestures in a concentrated 36-hour period in Israel. You've touched the core and the stones of our being. In the Kotel, the Western Wall yesterday, now in Yad Vashem, and now in our wonderful museum. You, First Wife, First Lady Melania Trump, your family and your delegation, you've shown a great commitment to Israel's future and to its security. I want to thank you, Mr. President, for standing up for Israel at the United Nations and everywhere else. And I thank you for your unrelenting support and a friendship that comes from the heart to the Jewish people and the Jewish state. Thank you, President Trump. God bless you, God bless Israel, and God bless the United States of America.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's very nice. And thank you to Prime Minister Netanyahu. And I also want to thank Sarah for hosting us last night in really a very unforgettable dinner. We had a great time. We talked about a lot of very, very important things. And thank you to Ambassador David Friedman and Mrs. Friedman for joining us, along with a number of very good friends who have come from our country to yours as we reaffirm the unshakable bond between the United States of America and Israel. Thank you. I'd like to begin my remarks today by sending the thoughts and prayers of the entire American people to the victims of the terrorist attack in Manchester. You know, you've all been watching, you've seen just a horrible thing going on. I want to send our condolences to the many families who lost their loved ones. Horrific, horrific injuries. Terrible. Dozens of innocent people, beautiful young children, savagely murdered in this heinous attack upon humanity. I repeat again that we must drive out the terrorists and the extremists from our midst, obliterate this evil ideology, and protect and defend our citizens and people of the world. All civilized nations must be united in this effort. This trip is focused on that goal, bringing nations together around the goal of defeating the terrorism that threatens the world and crushing the hateful ideology that drives it so hard and seems to be driving it so fast. It is a privilege to stand here in this National Museum, the ancient city of Jerusalem, to address the Israeli people and all people in the Middle East who yearn for security, prosperity, and peace. Jerusalem is a sacred city. Its beauty, splendor, and heritage are like no other place on earth. The ties. What a heritage, what a heritage. The ties of the Jewish people to this holy land are ancient and eternal. They date back thousands of years, including the reign of King David, whose star now flies proudly on Israel's white and blue flag. Yesterday, I visited the Western Wall and marveled at the monument to God's presence and man's perseverance. I was humbled to place my hand upon the wall and to pray in that holy space for wisdom from God. I also visited and prayed at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, a site revered by Christians throughout the world. I laid a wreath at Yad Vashem, honoring, remembering, and mourning the 6 million Jews who were murdered in the Holocaust. I pledged right then and there what I pledge again today, the words, never again. Israel is a testament to the unbreakable spirit of the Jewish people. From all parts of this great country, one message resounds, and that is the message of hope. Down through the ages, the Jewish people have suffered persecution, oppression, and even those who have sought their destruction. But through it all, they have endured, and in fact, they have thrived. I stand in awe of the accomplishments of the Jewish people, and I make this promise to you. My administration will always stand with Israel. Thank you very much. Through your hardships, you have created one of the most abundant lands anywhere in the world, a land that is rich not only in history, culture, and opportunity, but especially in spirit. This museum, where we are gathered today, tells the story of that spirit, from the two holy temples to the glorious heights of Masada. We see an incredible story of faith and perseverance. That faith is what inspired Jews to believe in their destiny, to overcome their despair, and to build here, right here, a future that others dared not even to dream. In Israel, not only are Jews free to till the soil, teach their children, and pray to God in the ancient land of their fathers, and they love this land, and they love God. But Muslims, Christians, and people of all faiths are free to live and worship according to their conscience and to follow their dreams right here. Today, gathered with friends, I call upon all people, Jews, Christians, Muslims, and every faith, every tribe, every creed, to draw inspiration from this ancient city, to set aside our sectarian differences, to overcome oppression and hatred, and to give all children the freedom and hope and dignity written into our souls. Earlier this week, I spoke at a very historic summit in Saudi Arabia. I was hosted by King Salman, a very wise man. There, I urged our friends in the Muslim world to join us in creating stability, safety, and security. And I was deeply encouraged by the desire of many leaders to join us in cooperation toward these shared and vital goals. Conflict cannot continue forever. The only question is when nations will decide that they have had enough bloodshed, enough killing. That historic summit represents a new opportunity for people throughout the Middle East to overcome sectarian and religious divisions, to extinguish the fires of extremism, and to find common ground and shared responsibility in making the future of this region so much better than it is right now. Change must come from within. It can only come from within. No mother or father wants their children to grow up in a world where terrorists roam free, school children are murdered, and their loved ones are taken. No child is born with prejudice in their heart. No one should teach young boys and girls to hate and to kill. No civilized nation can tolerate the massacre of innocents with chemical weapons. My message to that summit was the same message I have for you. We must build a coalition of partners who share the aim of stamping out extremism and violence and providing our children a peaceful and hopeful future. But a hopeful future for children in the Middle East requires the world to fully recognize the vital role of the State of Israel. And on behalf of the United States, we pledge to stand by you and defend our shared values so that together we can defeat terrorism and create safety for all of God's children. Israelis have experienced firsthand the hatred and terror of radical violence. Israelis are murdered by terrorists wielding knives and bombs. Hamas and Hezbollah launch rockets into Israeli communities where school children have to be trained to hear the sirens and to run to the bomb shelters with fear, but with speed. ISIS targets Jewish neighborhoods, synagogues, and storefronts. And Iran's leaders routinely call for Israel's destruction. Not with Donald J. Trump. Believe me. Thank you. I like you too. Despite these challenges, Israel is thriving as a sovereign nation, and no international body should question the contributions Israel makes to the region and indeed the world. Today, let us pray for that peace and for a more hopeful future across the Middle East. There are those who present a false choice. They say that we must choose between supporting Israel and supporting Arab and Muslim nations in the region. That is completely wrong. All decent people want to live in peace, and all humanity is threatened by the evils of terrorism. Diverse nations can unite around the goal of protecting innocent life, upholding human dignity, and promoting peace and stability in the region. My administration is committed to pursuing such a coalition, and we have already made substantial progress during this trip. We know, for instance, that both Israelis and Palestinians seek lives of hope for their children. And we know that peace is possible if we put aside the pain and disagreements of the past and commit together to finally resolving this crisis, which has dragged on for nearly half a century or more. As I have repeatedly said, I'm personally committed to helping Israelis and Palestinians achieve a peace agreement. And I had a meeting this morning with President Abbas and can tell you that the Palestinians are ready to reach for peace. I know you've heard it before. I am telling you, that's what I do. They are ready to reach for peace. And my meeting with my very good friend, Benjamin, I can tell you also that he is reaching for peace. He wants peace. He loves people. He especially loves the Israeli people. Benjamin Netanyahu wants peace. Making peace, however, will not be easy. We all know that. Both sides will face tough decisions. But with determination, compromise, and the belief that peace is possible, Israelis and Palestinians can make a deal. But even as we work toward peace, we will build strength to defend our nation. The United States is firmly committed to keep Iran from developing a nuclear weapon and halting their support of terrorists and militias. So we are telling you right now that Iran will not have nuclear weapons. America's security partnership with Israel is stronger than ever. Under my administration, you see the difference. Big, big, beautiful difference. Including the Iron Dome missile defense program, which has been keeping the Israeli people safe from short-range rockets launched by Hezbollah and Hamas, and David Sling, which guards against long-range missiles. It is my hope that someday, very soon, Israeli children will never need to rush towards shelters again as sirens ring out loud and clear. Finally, the United States is proud that Israeli Air Force pilots are flying the incredible new American F-35 planes. There's nothing in the world like them to defend their nation, and it was wonderful to see these mighty aircraft in the skies over Israel recently as you celebrated the 69th anniversary of Israel's independence. But even as we strengthen our partnership in practice, let us always remember our highest ideals. Let us never forget that the bond between our two nations is woven together in the hearts of our people, and their love of freedom, hope, and dignity for every man and every woman. Let us dream of a future where Jewish, Muslim, and Christian children can grow up together and live together in trust, harmony, tolerance, and respect. The values that practiced in Israel have inspired millions and millions of people all across the world. The conviction of Theodore Herzl rings true today. Whatever we attempt, there for our own benefit will rebound mightily and beneficially to the good of all mankind. As we stand in Jerusalem, we see pilgrims of all faiths coming to this land to walk on this hallowed ground. Jews place the prayers from their hearts in the stone blocks of the beautiful Western Wall. Christians pray in the pews of an ancient church. Muslims answer the call to prayer at their holy sites. This city, like no other place in the world, reveals the longing of human hearts to know and to worship God. Jerusalem stands as a reminder that life can flourish against any odds. When we look around this city, so beautiful, and we see people of all faiths engaged in reverent worship, and school children learning side by side, and men and women lifting up the needy and forgotten, we see that God's promise of healing has brought goodness to so many lives. We see that the people of this land had the courage to overcome the oppression and injustice of the past and to live in the freedom God intends for every person on this earth. Today in Jerusalem, we pray and we hope that children around the world will be able to live without fear, to dream without limits, and to prosper without violence. I ask this land of promise to join me to fight our common enemies, to pursue our shared values, and to protect the dignity of every child of God. Thank you. God bless you. God bless the state of Israel. And God bless the United States. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
We just heard about a 20-minute speech from the President of the United States there on the stage at the Jerusalem Israeli Museum, that is to say, in Jerusalem with the Prime Minister, Bibi Netanyahu. According to schedule, they're a little behind schedule, but they're supposed to take off. The President is in about an hour at 8:45 this morning. And so we would imagine they will leave the museum right here, and the President will then chopper over to the Tel Aviv airport.
Look at the bottom of the screen there. The President said Iran will not have nuclear weapons. Pretty powerful.
And he also reaffirmed his belief that he is going to is going to enforce the bonds between the two nations more than the previous administration. And he got a standing ovation for that when he said not under Donald J. Trump. So, so the president being received wraps up a very strong 2 legs of his journey, wouldn't you say?
Now heads to meet with the Pope. In the meantime,
we've got a Fox News alert. At 10 minutes before the top of the hour, we have just learned 7 dangerous terrorists are dead after a U.S. Navy SEAL raid and airstrikes overnight. It happened at an al-Qaeda compound in central Yemen. The goal was to grab laptops and mobile phones and other intel things to learn more about the AQAP, al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula terror group.
this is the second time this year that U.S. forces have carried out a raid in the embattled nation. In January, Navy SEALs carried out a similar operation in a neighboring province, killing warfare operator William Ryan Owens.
Right. That is now a new theater of operations that we're having consistent operations in, because we feel as though Al-Qaeda cannot take, every time we see them putting down roots, it's up to us to unearth them. Meanwhile, coming up straight ahead in the next hour and 10 minutes, well, on our show, we're going to take a look at the president's trip as he's wrapping up in Israel, fresh off a trip to Israel en route to the Vatican. We'll see how it's going now with some experts.
There's also news of an arrest in Manchester, and we have those details for you.
That's right. It's a fluid situation, and apparently they have grabbed a 23-year-old man. He's been arrested in connection with the bombing. There was an earlier arrest at a shopping center, not connected, but apparently they've got some questions for one man in South Manchester about what happened last night after the Ariana Grande concert.
2 dead, 59 wounded, many struggling for their lives right now in 8 different area hospitals in and around Manchester in England after the attack last night at the Ariana Grande concert at this huge concert hall. As the concert came to a close, the explosion went off. Suicide bomber was found. They've already made 1 arrest. I want to now bring in, by the way, ISIS has just taken responsibility for the attack. They say one of their members was the one who perpetrated this horrific crime, killing, we understand, sadly, children. Let's bring in now Milwaukee County Sheriff and a familiar face here on Fox News, David Clark. Sheriff Clark, we understand the DHS has responded. They have no credible reports here, but I imagine security is going to change in concerts for the foreseeable future. Am I correct?
Yeah, it has to. You know, this is going to be the way of life for some time, but at least we have a president. And doesn't he make you proud, you know, just to listen and watch him on the world stage and how the world gets to see that we have a leader. He's not out there on this apology tour. He's out there, and he knows, he being President Trump, knows that America must take the lead. Sure, we need allies, but we must take the lead, whether we like it or not, to root out terrorism. The world comes together in condemnation of what we saw last night in Manchester. You know, the gore, the ugliness, the pain, the death. And we grieve with them, but at the same time, the world's going to have to come together. And this president knows that and show the resolve to root these individuals out and to kill them. I was glad to see this Navy SEAL raid, and there have been several like that. Those are the sorts of things that are going to have to be necessary. But the world's going to have to support us, come along with us, but support us if they don't want to or they don't have the means, because this is a worldwide problem. Now, I've said this before, that it's just a matter of time before there's a suicide bomber in the United States again. And, you know, it's going to be a game changer, obviously. You've mentioned the changes that are going to be necessary at some of these mass events. That's what the terrorists do. They go after events where there are a lot of people so they can inflict a lot of damage. But we cannot shut down the American way of life because of this. We're going to have to stare this evilness down. Al-Qaeda, once again, shows that their immoral elevator has no bottom floor. These are the people who have put people in cages and set it on fire, put people in cages and dropped it in water to have people drown, chopped off heads, attacked Christians in prayer on Palm Sunday. You know, it's unbelievable that there are still people in this country, and they're mainly on the left, who don't see this for the crisis that it really is, and they find excuses for this nonsense, and it's got to stop.
Right. As the sheriff continues his journey, we're also following the attacks over in London. Sheriff Clark, thank you so much. Back in just a moment. Fox News alert now. Moments ago, ISIS officially taking credit for the horrific bombing of the Ariana Grande concert in Manchester as it came to a close. Right now, the number is 22 dead, and among the dead, young children, some as young as 8 years old. 59 others were hurt, many struggling for their lives right now.
Horrifying screams filled the air outside that arena as 21,000 terrified fans heard the bang and then tried to get out of there as quickly as they could, leaping over chairs and barriers, doing everything they could to escape.
Oh my gosh. Wait on? What's happening? What's going on? Oh my God!
Police are calling this a terror attack, saying the cold-blooded killer blew himself up with a nail bomb near the exit. Nuts and bolts were flying around, striking teenagers that were trying to leave that concert. Parents are still frantically searching for their children that are missing at this hour, separated during that explosion.
I'm heartbroken at the moment because I don't know where she is. I don't know if she's alive even yet. They're just trying every social media site going. We're constantly ringing the phone, but it's just going straight through, so it cannot be connected at the moment.
A parent's worst nightmare. Authorities are now investigating if this was a lone wolf massacre or if he was part of a bigger network. Right now, we do know that a 23-year-old is in custody in connection with this.
A teenage victim of the explosion, the first one, has been identified as 18-year-old Georgina Bethany Callender, the Ariana Grande fan, posting this picture taken 2 years ago online before she went to last night's concert, saying she was so excited to see her again.
Obviously, the young girl on the left and Ariana Grande on the right.
You know, for the people of Britain, this is the worst attack on them since 2005, when 52 died, with multiple suicide attacks, remember? And then 4 years ago, Lee Rigby was really hatcheted to death, murdered on video, horrifically in the middle of the street in a wanton act of brutal violence. Greg Palcott is live in Manchester with the latest news of an arrest. Is that true, Greg?
There was an arrest, Brian, but police tend to be backing away from any direct connection between that arrest and the horrendous attack last night, part of a broader investigation. This city, this region is still reeling for this horrific attack. And Prime Minister Theresa May, in the past 60 minutes or so, probably summing up better than anyone. She said, and I quote, "This attack stands out for its cowardice. It was done for maximum carnage, and children and teenagers were targeted." Here's a bit more of what the Prime Minister had to say.
Images we hold in our minds should not be those of senseless slaughter, but of the ordinary men and women who put concerns about their own safety to one side and rushed to help.
A lot of emergency help here. Again, 22 killed. We learned that 59 are injured, and one report, and backed up to some degree by the Prime Minister, 19 in critical condition in 8 different area hospitals. And, according to the health authorities here, 60 others were treated at the scene. This was a horrific attack. We've seen the video, the carnage, the bloodshed, the young women, the young girls, teenagers, children running at the end of what should have been a very fun concert, but it was anything but. As you've been reporting, ISIS is now formally claiming responsibility, saying that this individual who was responsible for the attack is a soldier in ISIS. That's only intensifying the search for any backup, folks. For the actual attack, it is believed by police, was done by one person alone, but he did it to deadly effect. He was a suicide bomber, perhaps with nuts and bolts, creating a scene of carnage. Back to you, folks.
All right, Greg Palcott in Manchester, where they're still trying to put the pieces together. This happens while the President of the United States has been in Israel and the West Bank. Overnight, the President, his strongest language yet regarding terrorists, and particularly these people who struck at children. Here's the President last night in Bethlehem.
We stand in absolute solidarity with the people of the United Kingdom. So many young, beautiful, innocent people living and enjoying their lives murdered by evil losers in life. I won't call them monsters because they would like that term. I will call them from now on losers, because that's what they are. They're losers. Our society can have no tolerance for this continuation of bloodshed. We cannot stand a moment longer for the slaughter of innocent people. The terrorists and extremists and those who give them aid and comfort must be driven out from our society forever. This wicked ideology must be obliterated. All civilized nations must join together to protect human life and the sacred right of our citizens to live in safety and in peace.
Very appropriate, because the president, when he was running, he kept talking about, you're going to get tired of winning, we are going to be a nation of winners, and now he's calling these terrorists that are taking children away from their parents, they are losers, and not just losers in life, but they will lose this war because ISIS will be defeated.
Well, meanwhile, Ariana Grande is 23 years old. Most of their followers are young. In fact, some eyewitnesses said that as they looked in the audience, they saw from 8 to 16-year-old girls, the young ones with their parents, the other ones who are around 14, 15, had their parents waiting on the outside, and one parent said this: I was waiting through the first set of doors for his daughter to walk out, and as I was waiting there, an explosion went off. It threw me through the first set of doors, 30 feet through the next set of doors. When he got up, he saw nothing but people and carnage around him.
And this is relatable, Brian, because we talked about what happened in Boston. We've all been to a race or on the sidelines of some sort of a sporting event and watched that. We've all been to a concert. We can relate to this, especially as mothers to young girls. You want to go to these events and you want to enjoy it. You want them to experience things like this and have great memories and remember it for the rest of their lives. It's a different story here.
Absolutely, Ainsley. You got to figure they had tickets in hand for a while, as kids love to do. Hey, she's coming to town. Let's get the tickets. The parents get the tickets. They look forward to it. They go. It's a nightmare. Aaron Cohen is a former member of the Israeli Defense Forces, and he joins us live right now from Los Angeles. Aaron, when you look at what happened, the lay of the land is you've got this big arena with 20,000 kids in it, and right next door to it you've got the subway stop, Victoria Station, and in the middle is the foyer to the arena. It also leads to the subway, to the tube, and that's where this person, who it sounds like got off the subway, detonated to the maximum number of people, because the concert was over, people were going home, they were having a great time, and then all hell broke loose. Aaron?
Yeah, it was clearly a planned attack, and the terrorist went with the target of least resistance. Reports that I'm hearing from people who are familiar with the site security said that the security was actually fairly laxed. I'm not even sure if there was any significant bag checking happening before. The terrorist choosing to detonate himself while the concert was exiting is exactly what terrorists do. They mold and form themselves in order to be able to go after crowds. Terrorists love crowds, and what we should be thinking about is any type of crowded event, we need to be looking at those crowds and figuring out how to insulate those to avoid this type of catastrophe. Otherwise, we're going to see something like this here, and it's probably not that far away.
Aaron, I'm telling you, I haven't been to an event in the last 5 years that I wasn't forced to empty my pockets, even in PRES, with the PRES as well. And if you have a bag, they got to go through it, and there's quick lines, fast lines, but you always through it, just like an airport.
Even at church, it happened on Sunday.
Right, I did not know that. But I will say this: I thought the president was on the money when he was speaking this morning and said this. And he called us losers. But I have even a better, more accurate one. James Mitchell, who really came up, co-authored the Enhanced Interrogation Program, says he knows the mindset of somebody who would do that. And he said, here it is.
That there are no innocent bystanders, that it's perfectly permissible from the fatwas that they've received to target children for lots of reasons. One reason is that parents pay taxes that support the resistance to the spread of Islamic domination around the world. Another reason, he told me, was that if you leave the children of the infidels alive, all that does is restock the ranks of your enemies, right? And then finally, if you can kill enough children, it will frighten the parents who are likely to resist enough that they will withdraw and just simply not want to get involved in that.
Aaron, what's your reaction?
My reaction is look, I've been around this. I was around this for almost 7 years as an American serving in the Israel Defense Forces unit, and this is no different than the mindset of Hamas or Hezbollah or Islamic Jihad. And what you have here is it's almost like an illness. It's such an indoctrination to where they view children as being something that they have to exterminate in order to prevent further budding, which could again go against their fatwa or against what their ultimate goals are, which is to spread this Sharia or this extreme version of Sharia across the world. So the gentleman, the interrogation expert, I completely agree with him. Unfortunately, we can't go after kids, and we can't start cutting off the roots of their children to keep them from carrying out acts of terror, and we've seen child suicide bombers in Israel. It happened at an Israeli checkpoint. We've seen teenagers martyr themselves. It's part of the education system, and it's part of ISIS's education system and Al-Qaeda as well. And so we don't have the luxury of being able to just decimate those regions and turn them into a big lake. That would be an easy solution. But what we have to do is get 5 steps ahead of this radical, to the extreme brainwashed ideology. The only way to defeat this is to play our own version of fear. And I'll tell you, that's what the terrorists understand. They do understand fear. And because they're afraid, they decide to go after the children because they know that that's something that would affect them as well. And that fear and psychology is a very powerful tool against extremists, and that's something that we have to start looking at and positioning ourselves for. But we need to start. We've got great special ops abroad. We've got that game going well. We need to start this defense here in the U.S., guys, and start insulating everything with these crowds, and then start looking how to start pushing that fear out to get them on the defense, and that's the key.
Aaron, did you hear when the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, was talking about if this terrorist in Manchester was a Palestinian, then his family would receive a stipend from the government because they reward terrorists?
Yeah, and then he'd receive a kidnapping from my unit. Excuse me, a controlled arrest. Yes, I did hear that, and Israel has a very strict policy which in the short term is very effective, which is, well, look, the family of terrorists in Israel receive money. Palestinians receive money to martyr themselves. Kids who don't fit into society, who are searching for something and are outcast, are the first ones to go volunteer for Hamas. Hamas also uses terror tactics against their own citizens and say, "Are you with us?" And they say, "Well, of course we're with you." And they'll say, "Great, here's a suicide vest." Yeah. So, right. Yes, these tactics these pressure tactics are common amongst the extreme ideology, and the weak are picked and pulled in, and yes, families would be rewarded, and in Israel we would almost destroy a home because again it's that sending that message of if you commit an act of terror, well then all of your family members will feel that.
Aaron, appreciate it, especially knowing that a lot of people are going to be going to concerts, theaters, and whatever, and wonder if there's going to be a simultaneous attack. They need to know what security is going to be here. Thanks so much for your insight.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, the security has been unbelievable in Israel and the West Bank. That's where the president is wrapping up a 2-day trip. That's also where John Roberts is. He's in Jerusalem right now with the very latest. John.
Steve, good morning to you. The president helicoptering back on Marine One to Tel Aviv, where he'll get on Air Force One, and he's heading to Rome because he's going to be meeting with the Pope in the next few hours. But what happened today really kind of tragically reinforcing what the president has been talking about since he touched down in Riyadh back on Saturday. The president tweeting out this morning, quote, "We stand in absolute solidarity with the people of the United Kingdom." Since he touched down here in the Middle East, the president has been working to build coalitions against terror and sending the message to Arab and Muslim nations that there's no glory in terrorism. There's only a swift end to your life and eternal condemnation. And you saw what the president said when he was with Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian president, meeting in Bethlehem earlier today, where he called the terrorist bomber who hit Manchester last night, quote, "an evil loser," saying we can't glorify these people by calling them monsters. And he's called upon the nations of the Middle East and Muslim nations around the world to defeat the extremist ideology that fuels terrorism and drive those people and that ideology out of their country. He repeated that again this morning. Listen to what the president said.
I repeat again that we must drive out the terrorists and the extremists from our midst, obliterate this evil ideology, and protect and defend our citizens and people of the world.
And Steve, Brian, and Ainsley, I have to tell you that the president has found a new spirit of cooperation, particularly in the Arab world, because he sees Iran differently than President Obama did. President Obama was trying to negotiate with Iran. President Trump told the Muslim nations and the Arab world over the weekend that it represents an existential threat, not only to Israel, but also to the Arab world. So there's shared interest there in defeating Iran, which is an exporter of terrorism. And listen to what the president said this morning here at the Israel Museum about Iran.
ISIS targets Jewish neighborhoods, synagogues, and storefronts. And Iran's leaders routinely call for Israel's destruction. Not with Donald J. Trump. Believe me.
Obviously, a tremendous amount of appreciation for that sentiment here at the Israel Museum. After Rome, the president's heading to Brussels, Belgium, for the NATO summit, where he will reiterate his call for NATO countries to band together to fight terror. And then he's headed for Sicily for a summit of the G7 nations, in which he will reiterate that call as well. This has been a lot about economics. This has been a lot about military deals. But more so than anything, this first foreign trip of the president really has been about combating terrorism. Brian, Stephen Ainsley, that was the importance of that really driven home with what happened so tragically in Manchester last night.
And John, just put on your analyst hat for a second. The next step is going to be the Pope, and then they're going to get to NATO. NATO has a much different view of Iran. It might not be happy that the president's putting such a stark line between Iran and the rest of the Arab world.
I don't really think he cares, Brian. Don't forget that when the president was talking during the election campaign about NATO being obsolete, he said what NATO really needs to focus on is counterterrorism. And as a result of what the president was saying, NATO has created a counterterrorism arm. So Jens Stoltenberg, who is the NATO Secretary General, appreciates a lot of what this president is saying, particularly in terms of NATO nations ponying up their commitments monetarily to NATO. So I think he's got some friends there, despite the fact that a lot of people have been very critical of this president for some of what he's been saying about NATO.
Yeah, that's true. I'm sure you're right. He doesn't care. I'm just saying that in the private meetings, he might hear a little counter, a counter view, but not saying that'll change his view.
He likely will, but again, I don't think he cares, Brian.
You're right about that.
Thanks, John Roberts.
John Roberts, our globetrotter for this trip. All right, he mentioned the President of the United States. The President is choppering over to Air Force One. There's a picture of Air Force One at the Tel Aviv airport. When the President arrives on Marine One, we'll take you there live.
Do you have to put your tray table up on Air Force One?
You don't have to do anything you don't want to do.
I guess not.
Well, we have seen how far these terrorists are going to go to kill us, to kill our children. So how far should our president, President Trump, go to destroy them? Here to react to this and to his message this morning, our panel, we have Ryan Morrow, that is with the Clarion Project, national security analyst, and we have former Pentagon official Michael Makovsky. Thank you both for being with us.
Thank you.
Ryan, how do you answer that? We've seen how far these terrorists are going to go. What does our president need to go to obliterate them, in his words?
Sure. Well, we saw him speaking in Saudi Arabia, and there were some moments that were real standouts. I would say it was the closest he might come to a tear down this wall moment. But it was a call to action, not a plan to action. We needed to have the Islamist ideology and its infrastructure dismantled. I want to hear a plan about how to stop the mosques, the radical funding of those mosques, the radical Islamic schools. But some of the language that you just saw was also very helpful when he's calling the terrorists losers. That's actually impactful because it's this idea of success that enables them to recruit and say, Allah is blessing us.
All right, so Michael, what does the president's plan need to be then?
Look, I think the president's rhetoric and the symbolism of the trip has been excellent. To translate that into policy, I think he needs to confront our dubious allies in this fight against terror. For instance, in Riyadh, he met the Qatari head, and I think we need to tell the Qataris that if they continue to support terrorism and radical Islam, then we'll relocate our military assets from that country that is protecting them. And I think to the Palestinian Authority, he needs to tell them that if they continue to sponsor, finance, and reward terror, that we're going to reduce the several hundred millions of dollars of aid that we give them.
Well, Benjamin Netanyahu did touch on that, and so did our president. I know you're the CEO of the Jewish Institute for the National Security of America. The president was there at the Holocaust Memorial, at the Israel Museum, and also, as we've seen, with the Prime Minister of Israel. Did he have a strong enough message to the Palestinian Prime Minister after he went into the West Bank area and did meet with him?
I think his message was pretty good. publicly, which is that he highlighted this issue that the Palestinian Authority is rewarding terror, and now I think privately they need to follow. The administration needs to follow up with the Palestinians and say, look, we're going to support this Taylor Force Act in Congress. We're going to cut our aid to you if you don't change your behavior and your rhetoric.
Ryan, I know you're a professor of counterterrorism and you're teaching classes on this. What would be your advice to the president to make sure something like this Ariana Grande concert doesn't happen here?
Well, again, I would say it goes back to dismantling the Islamist infrastructure, reassessing our allies such as Turkey and Qatar is very important, but also don't allow people like the leader of the Palestinian Authority to lie to you. When he says that he's creating a culture of peace for the children, that is a lie. It's not spin, a difference of opinion. It is a lie, and we need to respond to it.
How do you change that ideology, though?
Well, first of all, you can cut off funding to these entities that are brainwashing children. And we have to look at the polls. Just look at the polls. When you look at Palestinian opinion, the majority not only desire the destruction of Israel, they believe it is possible. And that's because of the concessions that they get in response to their violence.
Yeah, they're teaching kids. They're teaching kids at an early age to do this and to be terrorists. But why are we still funding them, Ryan?
Political correctness, diplomatic pressure. You have allies that we are dependent upon that will say, well, you have to do this. It comes from this idea that terrorism is a byproduct of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, when really it's the reverse. The reason that we have this ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflict and so many other conflicts is because it is fueled by radical Islam and ferocious anti-Semitism. Remember, even before the State of Israel was established, you had the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, Hajj Amin al-Husseini, allying with Hitler. So this goes way back and it is very deep, and there has to be a detox of the societies that are infected with this anti-Semitism and this radicalism.
All right. Ryan, Michael, thank you both for being with us.
You.
We're going to have more on the breaking news this morning, the terrorist attack at the Ariana Grande concert. Also, Alan Dershowitz and the man who killed Osama bin Laden, Rob O'Neill, they are both here to react. Straight ahead.
Well, it looks like the estimated wheels up time was 8:45 this morning. We're at 8:30 Eastern right now. As you can see in Tel Aviv, the President of the United States has not yet arrived on Marine One. He's got about a 15, as the cameraman focuses in on the red carpet, he's got about a 15-minute chopper ride from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv. As soon as he arrives, we'll take you there live.
And joining us now in studio is not only our own Steve Hilton, Fox News contributor, David Cameron, longtime aide. We also have back with us Professor Alan Dershowitz, Fox News, of course. Professor Dershowitz, you have a long history with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and a personal history. You were able to help us out so much yesterday as the President walked through seeing all those historic sites in the region. So as the President has wheels up, leaving Israel after having dual speeches with the Prime Minister, how would you rate this visit?
Well, I would rate it very, very high. I just hope he had a private conversation with Abbas in Bethlehem in which he said, look, you cannot any longer be paying families who rewards for their kids engaged in terrorism. One of the major things we can do to reduce the kind of terrorism that we've seen in England is to stop legitimating it. We legitimate it at the UN. We legitimate it through Qatar, which is one of our allies that pays Hamas to engage in terrorist acts. New York City College this week is going to honor and have as its graduation speaker a woman named Linda Sassour, who has embraced terrorists who have killed children and young people. We just cannot continue along that path.
How's that happen, where that kind of behavior becomes normal?
Yeah, and I hope that every City College family and alumni will protest. They shouldn't stop her from speaking, but they should hand out leaflets describing who she's been associated with, what her attitudes are. She wants to bring Sharia law to the United States, and she will not renounce the kinds of terrorism that we see going on around the world today.
Steve, what were your thoughts? We all thought, it's two different stories here. We've got the President there, but the timing is impeccable because we've got this breaking news story happening in the UK. We all thought of you. We see Theresa May coming out. What are your thoughts? I mean, this happened to your area. You're from that area.
And it's not the first time. And I think actually, funnily enough, it was something that Theresa May herself said that really reflected what I felt, which is we see these things happen. The same words get spoken each time, but that doesn't mean that it's any less important to say them. I think that the thing that really stuck out for me today was actually something the President said. And it was probably the most unusual thing that's been said all day, and that's his use of the word loser. to describe these people is actually not particularly diplomatic. It's different kind of language. But I think it gets to the heart of something, because what you see in each of these events is actually something that an act of terror committed by a young Muslim man. That's always who it is. And what we have to understand is that there's a culture going on in many parts of the world where people like that are radicalized or self-radicalized precisely because they think they're the opposite of a loser. They think that this is the way to glory, to reward, spiritual and sometimes financial. And actually, a big part of this fight is to say, no, it's not right. You are a loser if you do this. You're not some kind of hero.
Sure.
And I think that the fight against this isn't just something we're going to win militarily or through the security system. It's actually exactly what Alan was saying. It's a cultural fight, just as much as anything else.
We have an attack in Paris in April, in Stockholm, April, in St. Petersburg, bombing in April, and Westminster Bridge attack happened in March, at the Louvre in February. That's just 2017. This is getting so much worse.
And you hear people try to be sympathetic to the terrorists, saying, oh, they grew up poor, they had no opportunity. That is total nonsense. A lot of these terrorists are well educated, they're wealthy, they've had every opportunity, they've been welcomed to countries like Great Britain, educated, welcome to the United States. This is not about poverty, this is not about disenfranchisement. This is about a culture and an ideology that supports it from the very, very top down. And one of the worst offenders is the Palestinian Authority and Abbas, that rewards, has a statute, a law on its book, giving rewards to the families of terrorists. That has to
Saddam Hussein did that for the longest time,
and
that
Iran
stopped.
does that today as
That's
well.
exactly right. The people that carry out these disgusting attacks, they're the extreme, they're the tip of the iceberg. But we've got to remember that there's an iceberg there, the culture that they, if you like, go above. And we've got to really call upon people in those communities to do more to identify and stop
What about the Muslim mayor of London? Couldn't he go a long way to speaking out today, even though it's Manchester?
Oh, I'm sure he will be. I mean, I don't think that you're going to see him not understand how important it is for him to show leadership, for him personally.
And everybody has good things to say generally about him. He's built very good bridges to the Jewish community, Christian communities, and I think it helps send the message that being a Muslim could make you a person of peace. It's not Islam. It is the abuse of Islam. I think the president got it exactly right when he spoke in Saudi Arabia about that.
Professor Dershowitz, what is stunning about the attack last night at 10:33 after the Ariana Grande concert, we've been talking about how there are 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old girls, for the most part, in the audience, and just the humanity of this cold-blooded killer targeting children is so unbelievable for us.
Well, and it's reminiscent of course, I'm a Bostonian for 50 years. Those two brothers walking through the Marathon area, picking a spot where there were kids. I knew one of the young women who had her legs damaged very seriously. How a person could do this, walk and look people in the eye, knowing that a minute from now they're going to be dead because you've made an anti-personnel bomb. We've done it in this country too. We've glorified the weathermen. Remember what they were doing? They were making anti-personnel bombs. They were using nails to try to kill American soldiers. There can't be any tolerance of terrorism no matter what the cause.
No, you're absolutely right, Professor. What about the security, Steve, in the UK? I mean, all these witnesses were saying at the concert there was no security. And whether or not that would have made a difference, we don't know. But to know you can walk into a concert and you don't have to have your bag checked, especially this day and age?
I think it's going to change. I think that what happens often, and sadly, is that you see something happen, and then it catches the authorities unaware, points out gaps in security.
We always react.
And we always react. And that's just the kind of catch-up that I think that happens, and it's, I'm afraid, one of those things that goes with having an open society. And that's, of course, what these people really hate. And that's what they really are aiming at.
So do you think it's an important symbolism that today, I'm not saying it's related because clearly it couldn't be, but there's a raid in Yemen of an al-Qaeda site in Yemen on a regular basis. Now we're also picking up the pace of ISIS over in Syria while still trying to take back Mosul. Do you think those things pressuring the nucleus of where they're at will help us in the cities where we don't even know where they're at?
I think we have to make ISIS pay a heavy price every time they take credit for a terrorist attack.
Which they did about an hour ago.
And the price has to be very, very heavy. And look, inevitably, there are going going to be civilian casualties when you attack terrorist groups that purposely embed themselves among civilians. And that's always a very heavy cost, but it's a cost that we have to incur because it's their civilians versus our civilians. And we have to put the lives of innocent civilians who are the victims of terrorist attacks very high on the agenda.
This administration a lot different than the last one. He's meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu. They're very close friends. They seem to be very connected. And this is not their first meeting since he's become president. But also what he said about Iran, that Iran's not going to have, not going to make nuclear weapons. What was your reaction to that?
Well, he went off script and he talked it through his heart. But now we have two more steps we have to take. Congress has to pass a statute saying we accept as American policy that Iran will never, ever be able to develop nuclear weapons. Remember that in the deal it says Iran reaffirms that it will never under any circumstances seek to develop. Then Congress has to pass a statute now authorizing the president to take whatever action, including military action, is necessary to prevent Iran from becoming another North Korea. If we think we have problems with North Korea, Iran with a nuclear arsenal would be 100 times worse because they already have the delivery system.
And they have 10 years. So all they have to do is abide by this thing for 10 years, and then they can do whatever they want.
And they're developing their delivery system during the 10 years. The deal does not prohibit them from developing intercontinental
ballistic missiles. And inspectors can't go in unless they give them a 3-month notice.
Wow. So listen, last time we went to bed, we thought there were 19 victims, and that's 19 too many. Then we got up this morning, and we found out there were 22, and sadly, we have to add one more.
That's right. Sky News is reporting that one of the victims is 8 years old. Earlier, the first victim identified was 18, and now we know at the other end of the age spectrum, somebody died last night.
Once we find out her name, we'll let you know. But it's we've been looking through social media, and if you look up the hashtag Manchester, you can see the faces of these young, cute little girls, and their parents are looking for them.
Steve Hilton, you know, one of the things we have talked about over the last year or two is the way the open borders of the EU, and obviously the United Kingdom had a Brexit moment, didn't really like that so much, and then something like this happens. How do those square with each other?
Well, I think it would just confirm in people's minds how important it is for countries to assert the right to control their borders. That's what the UK did. That was a big part of what that Brexit vote was all about, and in great contrast to what's happening in other parts of Europe, particularly Germany. I wouldn't go so far as to say that there's that automatic connection.
Yeah, we don't know.
But it's absolutely clear that it's vital for countries to say, we want to make sure we are in control of who comes into our country. We want to welcome people. We think immigration is generally a good thing, good for our society, good for our economy, but only if we control it.
3,500 suspected terrorists in the UK, and the word is they're being surveilled less and less. That was much higher in 2015. Does there need to be more money? You guys pay enough, and you're one of us now. But the British pay enough in taxes. You gotta bolster the security forces even more now to surveil even more terrorists. And 400 have come back from Syria over the last 2 years.
And the European Court prevented Great Britain from deporting an imam who was preaching the most violent kind of terrorism. And one of the factors that went into Brexit is the idea that England does not want to be controlled from far away from bureaucrats telling them how to control their borders and how to control their terrorism.
That's exactly right. And Theresa May, by the way, when she was Home Secretary, fought that really aggressively. She did a great job trying to get around that ridiculous ruling.
Let me ask you something. We just got word, our producers are telling us that 12 children under the age of 16 were injured. And you have to keep in mind, this was a nail bomb, which means nails and screws and nuts and bolts. A terrible image, actually, to think about these little girls.
And I would add this, Ainsley, before I ask you a question, is that some of them could have been hurt in the stampede and the panic.
And you know what Palestinian terrorists have been known to do? Put rat poison on the nails so that if you're injured, it causes biological massive infection and bleeding.
Is evil. That is such evil.
Yes.
Tell us about the landscape of this area, because you know, Manchester's how far away from London?
It's not that far. It's 100 miles or so, 150 miles, but it's a very quick train ride away. It's very much a leading economic power in the UK. it's a really vibrant city.
Manchester City, Manchester United.
Exactly. And, you know, it's a place I know very well because if you're in politics there, you go to Manchester all the time for events and conventions and so on, and everyone enjoys going to Manchester. It's really one of those great northern industrial cities that's been revitalized in recent years. This took place right in the heart, in a place which is really an example of that revitalization.
As low as they can go.
And we had Theresa May, the Prime Minister, this morning say that this was the worst attack ever in northern England. All right, Steve, thank you very much.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Dershowitz.
Professor.
All right, straight ahead on this Tuesday, Rob O'Neill on how to stop terrorists willing to kill children. Fox News alert, the second victim killed by a terrorist at the Ariana Grande concert has just been identified. That's her picture. This is Safi Rose Roussos. She was 8 years old. Joins us right now, Rob O'Neill. Rob, it's hard to look at that picture.
It is. It's a brutal reality. I mean, everyone knows how precious children are, except for these people that think they're part of an enemy to their version of Sharia law. They justify killing kids because they're not kids. They're infidels. They're kufr. They're going to grow up to be bad people. So this is totally justified. The person who did it for his version of religious reasons, and it meant very selfishly that he gets to go to paradise.
That's right. Now, Rob, when you look at that picture, that is one of the reasons why you went into the line of work you did, isn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's the most difficult mission we did to kill the head of one of these horrible terrorist organizations, Osama bin Laden, was because of the children, the victims of 9/11, the people that deal with this. Children die in these attacks quite a bit, and it is this radical version that needs to be stamped out. And the candlelight diplomacy that we're trying right now is not working. We need to get real about the threat, what it is, and we need to name it. And President Trump is doing a good job of naming it, calling them what they are, losers. And we're going to need help from the world. This isn't a big portion of the world. Yeah. We're going to need everybody to help with it.
Well, and President Trump's point in calling them real losers, the fact that, you know, they do something like this horrific act, they like to be called a monster. He says, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to call them losers instead because they're losers.
They're losers. They are. And it's pretty obvious what's going on. This is a suicide bomber who was talked into it by a cleric who told him about this, you know, the great paradise. They embraced death more than they embraced life. The bomb maker, it's not a lone wolf. Someone made the bomb. The bomb maker didn't ignite the bomb himself. He's smarter. He's going to try to use it again. And stuff that needs to be considered. These are potentially people that came back from Syria who were fighting with the caliphate. As we start to squeeze what they thought was the Islamic State out of Syria, out of Iraq, they're going to start going back to their home countries. We need to be watching this. There needs to be a certain type of profiling that goes on with these types of people, both men and women, because these brides of the jihadis, they're in there too. The cubs of the caliphate, who are the kids. This is a big ideology. They all believe in it more than they believe in anything else, and they really want this to happen. They want to take over the world and destroy it.
Sure. We don't know at this point who the person is who was the bomber, and it could be a lone wolf. It could be somebody working with
There's been
more
names
people
being leaked out there. There's all kinds of video that's going to be out there. This is a bomb with nails. It smells like diesel, which to me says homemade explosives, ammonium nitrate. Somebody made it. Somebody blew themselves up. And I'm starting to see a pattern. I mean, it's not. I really think, and ISIS has their main responsibility, which they love, and they can do it with, you know, whether or not it was their person. This is the ideology that ISIS is trying to spread. This is what Al Qaeda likes to spread.
But it's just sad that young people who are doing this stuff, like whoever strapped this bomb on, thinks this is the way. This is how you do it.
And the scary thing is, someone taught him that.
Yeah. And he believed it.
I don't think people are born evil. I think people know what they're taught. So the teaching of this in the mosques, in the madrasas, by the bad people, we need the good guys on that, the good Muslims, the moderate Muslims, to tell us who they are, weed them out. You can't be teaching this. Like I keep saying too, there are videos online of 5-year-old children cutting the heads off of people. That person at 10 years, that child is not going to be normal. Yeah. You're not going to kill our way to this. We're not going to candlelight vigil our way to an end here. We need some education. We need some military strength, and we need people the realization of what is actually going on right now, why it's happening.
I was talking to my daughter last night after this. We were talking about, you know, you work in Midtown Manhattan and you got to go through Times Square fast. You know what happened there last week. And then she was going, you know, I would love to go to an Ariana Grande concert, But I don't know if I want to go out in a large group of people anymore.
And this is how the terrorists are going to win. This is going to affect the economy. This is going to affect the votes. How are parents of the children going to vote now with all this going on? This affects everything. I get asked the question too with my book about killing Osama bin Laden. Aren't you worried about you're a target? Well, guess what? We're all targets.
Good point. All right, the book is called The Operator. Rob O'Neill, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it.
All right, it's a Fox News alert right now. We are awaiting President Trump. Those are live images from the airport at Tel Aviv. He's about to arrive and depart for Rome. We're going to take you there as soon as it happens. But right now, let's go upstairs and find out.